Welcome back to PodX. This is me, Ayush, Majithia, your host, and I'm having Kareena Aswani, the founder of Acing Languages, with us today on the podcast. And I'm really excited. There's a lot of things to learn from her. So, Kareena, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, Kareena, I wanted to start off with basically, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how did you come up and decide to how did you come up with Acing Languages and decide to build that?
Right, so I was born and brought up in Spain, and I grew up between Spain, Morocco, and India. I went to an international British school in Spain till the age of 17, and then I moved abroad to Paris and Singapore for university. I've always been passionate about languages. Growing up, I used to speak Spanish, English, Hindi, and French. And so that's something that's always been within me. And I used to teach Spanish and French to students as well. So those students did really well in their tests, and it suddenly had like 30, 40 students approaching me. So that's when I thought of starting Acing Languages, in which I would be connecting teachers and students directly.
Okay, that sounds fantastic. I know 4 languages, I think.
That's
English.
amazing.
Yeah, well, it's all the Indian languages because I feel, don't you think like people in India actually end up knowing a lot more languages than people outside?
Yeah,
I
of
think that's
course.
right. Because we have so many native
We
languages.
do have so many native languages in it. So
Correct.
what languages do you speak, if I can ask you?
It's English, Hindi, Gujarati, and since I'm brought up in Goa, a little bit of Konkani.
Wow.
But I'll say a little bit because I had a lot of confidence in my Konkani game. But this actually happened one time where I was driving and I didn't look 18, right? Where I clean shaved and all that stuff, so I didn't look old enough. And so one of the policemen stopped me and then he asked me for my license and all. And he saw like it was a Goa number plate, so he started talking in Konkani. And then I started replying in Konkani.
Yeah.
And it didn't make sense. And then we both ended up talking in Hindi.
I love that.
So, yeah.
That's really cool. You'll have to teach me some at the end of this podcast.
Let's see. I can try.
Okay, perfect.
So, how many languages do you know?
I speak 6 languages.
So, how do you come up with the concept of native to students? Like native people teaching students, they don't have like a professional degree to teach on.
Correct.
So, how does that make sense?
Right. So I think I've always been pretty lucky in the sense that in school, when I learned any foreign language, whether it was Spanish, then French, then Italian, I always had a native teacher teaching me. So with the result, when I would go to these countries, I was able to converse like a local. So for me, that's always been very important. And coming to India, I would notice that the teachers are always Indians teaching the language. So that's something that I really wanted to incorporate. And actually, our teachers are very well qualified, especially when it comes to the academic program, because they've done the IGCSE or the IB curriculum. So you're not just learning from someone who studied it and worked on it and then is teaching it, but it's someone who's actually lived it. So that's our USP, I would say. And same for business. So if we're pairing someone up for Italian and fashion, we try to get someone who's worked in the fashion industry and then can teach Italian, who is from Italy. So that I would say is our biggest USP.
Okay. That's like really nice because it gets very difficult for you to find people like that. Like if you're looking for someone like a guy in the pharma industry who knows Mandarin. And you have to specifically find those kind of people and then you'll have to convince them to teach.
Right.
So that gets like a long and that's a really cool process.
Thank you.
Say.
Thank you.
But I wanted to ask you, since you've mentioned, can you mention like all the different types of levels that you'll have, which you'll provide on your platform, and how do you pair the students and teachers? Like, okay, which teacher should be teaching at what level? How do you do that?
Right, that's a great question. So I would say we teach, whether from beginner to intermediate level of languages. So when you think of it, it's between an A1 and a B2 level. But what we do is extremely customized. We have different programs. We do language learning for fun, language learning for business purposes, and also language learning for academic purposes. So whether it's the IGCSE or the IB curriculum. And when it comes to pairing teachers, we always look at their background. So for example, if it's someone learning in the pharmaceutical industry, we try to get a teacher who maybe has worked in the pharmaceutical industry who can then help with that. Or if it's fashion, someone who's worked in the fashion industry. So natives and someone who has that business experience, or when it comes to academics, someone who knows the IGCSE and the IB really well, who's taught it and maybe who has also done it. So that's how we look at their profiles, their backgrounds, and then we pair them with our students directly. So that's what gets them to speak the language fluently, and then they get really good grades as well.
Okay, that's really interesting. I want to come to like the business perspective because, like I told you, I find entrepreneurship very interesting, and this is something which I personally wanted to know. So for Acing Languages, what do you think would be your target audiences?
Right.
Because there's like a vast range of people. I think even kids would want to learn languages. Like they are in school, probably they need it for the exams.
Correct.
Or they want to learn it as a hobby. Then there are adults that would want to learn it as a hobby. Then there are people who are in the working professional field, as you mentioned.
Right.
So how do you all manage, like, who are you all targeting specifically?
Yeah.
And how do you all manage to cater to everyone?
Correct. So I think anyone and everyone can learn a foreign language as long as they're inspired and motivated to do it. So I wouldn't say we have one specific target audience, but I would say that when we started off, it was mostly for an academic purpose. So we were mostly helping people with the IGCSE and the IB. And as Acing Languages grew and as it grows, we've started also doing language learning for business purposes, language learning for fun. So to summarize your question, I would say there's no specific target audience, but it's basically anyone and everyone who wants to learn a foreign language. And then we customize the syllabus and personalize it based on their needs.
Okay. But how do you market the product then? Because if you have such a large TA,
Correct.
I think running ads would be a little bit difficult.
Right.
Secondly, I think another issue that would be is like, okay, word of mouth would be great.
Correct.
I feel.
Yes.
So how do you do it?
Yes, that is a great question. So far everything has been extremely organic. We haven't done any paid promotions or advertising. In fact, we haven't really felt the need to. We were, touch wood, profitable since the first year, and it is growing organically in that sense. What we did do is we started collaborating with counselors and education companies who promoted us. So that's a model we've been using that has been pretty successful. So that was for the academic side, and for business side, that's something we started just a few months ago. And I think it was all just through word of mouth, basically. And when it comes to advertising and marketing, we do everything through social media. So I think a testimonial speaks for itself. When a student is happy, they film a video, we post it, and we get maybe 3 or 4 new students through that video. So that's how we have been doing it so far.
You mentioned something about like collaborations, about collaborating with universities, counselors, and all that stuff. So do you think, like, in terms of business, do you think collaboration is important, or is it like trying to build your own structure in anything? What do you think is what makes more sense?
The most sense. I would say, like, when you say build your own structure, what exactly do you mean?
Okay, so let's say if I have a requirement for something, and I know another company can fulfill that, and I can like partner up with them on that.
Correct.
Or should I go ahead and build out so that I can create that on my own?
Correct.
So
I think with Acing Languages, we've been creating our own structure, in-house. We haven't been using any other, companies to do that. But I think collaborating with second parties like counselors has really helped us with the word of mouth. So I would say that's what has really helped us.
So it's like a mix of both.
It's a mix of both, yeah.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask you this also. You started at 20. I'm 21 now.
Right.
I feel like I've not done anything now that I'm sitting next to you.
Not at all.
So there's that. But you started at 20 and you were managing your business while you were managing college. So did you like face burnout?
I didn't face burnout. For me, keeping a social life and being able to meet my friends, at least stepping out of the house once a day, was very important. I did find that I started Acing Languages in my 3rd year of university. I was in Singapore at the time, so I would say I would get tired at times, but it's always important to take that trip, like that 2-day break or whatever. So I don't think I faced burnout, but of course there were many challenges as and when I was running the company that I faced. Yeah. So I think working out helps a lot.
Okay.
Watching a movie every now and then when you get a chance, stepping out for a coffee with your friends. I would also be working on Acing Languages in class sometimes, I'm not going to lie, while a university lecture was taking place, but I managed to, obviously get decent grades in my exams and get my degree, so I guess that's what matters.
Yeah, very random, like when you spoke about working out, I think that was one thing which I could relate to a lot. Like, so the thing is, even, so I've stopped going to the gym for like 3 or 4 months now.
Right.
But what happens is, during the exams also, what used to help is like there's so much of stress, there's so many things to focus on. And then I actually realized that, whenever I'm going to the gym and I'm coming back, I feel more focused. I can do better work.
Correct.
I feel.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I could relate to, and I felt that.
Yeah.
But could you tell me some of the challenges that you faced?
With Acing Languages?
Okay.
I think one of them was, of course, starting out and balancing out my studies and acing languages at the same time. I remember when my exams were going on, this was the time when we got one of our native teachers and he had a family emergency and he couldn't continue teaching that specific student. And this was when we were just starting out. So that student had exams, I had exams. So I remember that was a really big challenge trying to balance everything out. And of course, we got the student a really good replacement. So I think small challenges like that. I think now when I started Acing Languages, it was COVID time. So everyone was open to online learning. Now that COVID isn't there, people want to go back to live classes. So for me, I always tell them, take a trial with our native teacher and there's no going back. So I think that's another challenge we face. But otherwise, I think we've overcome those challenges with time.
And I wanted to ask you this question. How do you there's not exactly like a retention thing over here, but how do you get your audience to come back again? Because once I've learned a language, I'm done, right?
Correct.
So how do you like bring them again on board for another language or something like that?
Correct. So I think with language learning, you're never done. You always have to practice. So even if you say you learn Spanish and you become absolutely fluent in Spanish, if you don't practice for a year, you're going to end up forgetting. So especially for our students who are doing it for an academic purpose like IGCSE or IB, they learn to do well in their exams and post that they join a different path, which is the conversational program. And that's where they're paired up with a native teacher and they're just having weekly conversations to practice the language. So I think that's how we do it. Then a lot of our students who learn a language like Italian, French, Spanish, they don't mind learning a second one because all of these languages come from Latin. So it's very easy once you speak one to learn the other. So I think that's how we get students on board for other languages as well.
Okay, that's interesting. And I wanted to ask you this also. How do you focus on scaling the product? How did you when you began, there were certain number of students, and you said word of mouth and organic reach played a role. But how did you scale it to that point? What were the steps that were involved for you?
Right. So I think initially when we started out with just Spanish and French. So it was five teachers for Spanish, 5 for French. And then the first thing I had to do was I had to make sure I had a good team. So a good team of teachers training them. And then slowly that started growing. Word of mouth happened, so more students started coming as well. And now we have 50 teachers on board as well. So I think that was the main thing. To scale the business, we had to first make sure our quality was good, our team of 10 teachers were good, and then we started recruiting more teachers and collaborating with more counselors, and that's how we've scaled it so far.
I mean, there's a similar thing that's worked for me for podcasting, It's word of mouth has played a role. Just like you said, you provide the quality of work.
Correct.
So that's the same thing. I got certain people on the podcast that helped me build a lot of credibility. And with that, I can reach out to more people and expand that.
Correct.
So I feel that it's a similar process, I would say.
Yeah, I think for every business, word of mouth plays a very big role, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So, Kareena, I wanted to ask you this, that, if what is the difference between learning from a professional and someone who's speaking in native, whose native language is the language they're teaching? Because in schools, there's someone who's a professional teacher and that's not their native language. That's probably a language they've learned and they're teaching. So what's the difference, and are there any results that people see?
Correct. No, so I think learning with a native has many advantages. I think first of all, your speaking skills really improve. What I've seen with whoever I've taught, and I've worked with a lot of kids in IB schools here, their grammar is perfect, so reading, writing and listening skills are really good, but what they really struggle with is the conversation part and the speaking part. So I think at the end of the day, if you can't go to Spain or you can't go to France or any Latin American place, whichever country, and converse, then what's the point, right?
Correct.
So I think with the native, your accent comes good from day one. You're able to speak like them, like a local, and you're also indulging in the culture. So if you think of it like for an Indian student to open their computer and then suddenly see someone, a blonde person in Paris, and you see the Eiffel Tower in the background, you feel very excited about learning the language as well. So I think for us, it's all about that. It's all about having fun in class, learning the right accent, and indulging in the culture as well.
But do you think this will face any issues in the coming years? Because if you look at it, a lot of Edtech startups are failing right now.
Correct.
If you Byju's has gone down, I think Physics Wala's revenue was reported lesser this year.
Right.
Same with Unacademy, I think. So do you think this is going to affect this trend in the industry is going to affect your business, or like?
No, I don't think so. I think one thing about us, like I said, we're growing organically. It's all word of mouth, and I think if your quality is good, and you grow steadily, rather than that's why I don't want to scale overnight. Like we have in 3 years now, we have 50 teachers now. So like I'd rather take it slowly by slowly and make sure that our quality is good throughout, and then
yeah. I mean, yeah, like you said, you're going slowly. Otherwise, you could have probably like just gone out there and like these insane valuations that are out there.
Correct.
You could have just taken funding.
Correct. Yes. Yes. No, and we have been offered funding in the past.
But you're a bootstrap.
Yeah, we are, and in the future, maybe there is an opportunity where we would take it. But I think at the moment, for us, quality is the most important thing.
Correct. Okay, that makes sense. So, Kareena, I wanted to ask you is what are like the programs that are offered? So yeah, if you could tell me that.
Yes, of course. So we have several programs, like I said, what we do is extremely personalized. So we do language learning for fun, which is basically for anyone who wants to learn a foreign language. We focus mostly on conversation. We also do language learning for business purposes. So say you're working in the fashion industry and you are moving to Milan and you want to be able to speak in a business context, we would pair you with a native Italian teacher who would help you with that. And in just 20 to 30 hours, you would be able to converse in Italian. And then the third one we do is the academic so basically IGCSE and IB training, in which our students have seen really good results. They've gone from 5s to 7s in just like 20 to 30 hours. So that's the last program we offer. And we've also started doing translations for companies.
So like translations, as in like do you all just like translate text, or you like provide live translation courses?
So far live translations is something we're looking at, but the offers we've gotten are just for text, especially for Spanish and French. But of course we could also work on live translations if the opportunity comes.
So what are your future plans like for the company?
Right, so I think so far what we've done is we've collaborated with counseling companies and we've been getting students through word of mouth, but the idea would also be to collaborate with universities or schools directly and offer our native teachers to these schools. So I was looking at a couple of universities in Europe. So that's yes. So hopefully that all goes through.
So Kareena, I wanted to come to the topic of spirituality. I've had, I think, a lot of guests, whoever comes on board, I do talk to them about that. I don't know why. It's a topic that I enjoy truly. So, recently I saw that you posted this thing that you attended your first Satsang, and I think, do you think this is like your introduction to spirituality, or, okay, how would you define spirituality actually?
Right, so that's a very good question, a very deep question, I would say. But I think spirituality is, something that goes beyond us as individuals. And I think it's basically, honestly, I've always been open to my mom, like growing up, she would tell me whether you go to a temple or you go to a mosque or you go to a church, it's all about the vibrations you feel, and it's about disconnecting and forgetting about all the things you have around you and connecting with something greater than you. So I think that to me is spirituality. So I did attend my first satsang, second satsang. I've been attending other satsangs through a Guruji we follow as well. And for me, it's just like closing my eyes and, meditating or thinking about other things and going beyond the materialistic things in life. That's how I would put it.
I actually had my first experience in like spirituality. I don't know if it's exactly, I'm not sure if it was like a real experience or not. I feel it's very real, but I've had doubts because a lot of people have doubted me on that. So it was COVID, it was 2020, and I had started saying the Shiv Tandav Shlotam in the morning. So that was there, and you close your eyes, and I was facing the west side. Right. So the curtains were open.
Correct.
And it was early morning, probably 6:37 or something like that. And now if you think about it, the sun rises from the east, and I was facing the west. But while I was chanting the mantra, I could feel like this presence in the room.
Right.
And there was like this light which I felt was going through my eyelids.
Oh wow.
And that was like, I felt like I was in a moment of bliss at that time.
Amazing. See, so that's what it,
So that was my first experience. And then after that I kept on, I started meditating more and more and more. I started with guided meditation. But yeah, you were saying something.
That's amazing. I was saying that's exactly what it is, right? Connecting with something outside of this world, I guess, outside of this universe. So that's really cool that you had your first experience at such a young age.
Correct. So what would you say? Okay, I want to ask you this. A lot of people ask me this. So I thought, you've had your experience recently. So what do you think is like, what do you feel at a satsang?
What do I feel at a satsang? So I honestly...
Okay, why do you also keep on going again and again?
To satsangs?
Yeah.
So, I guess there are two types of satsangs I've been to. One is this Guruji that we follow, and they have a lot of satsangs across India and also abroad as well. So there are a few that happen in my building, and basically we just go, we listen to shabads, so songs, bhajans, and you just sing the bhajans, you have prasad, and then you just, I guess, disconnect and meditate throughout the satsang. Then of course I went for 2 art of living satsangs as well, so I think that was a little different to what I'm used to. The shabads were a little different. That was also live singing. So I think in both places, it's just about enjoying it, singing along to the bhajans and just disconnecting from everything else. I feel like when you go for a workout, after working out, you feel good about things. When you meditate or when you go for a satsang, it's the same thing. That's the same kind of feeling. I come out happy.
So I wanted to ask you this. This is like not related to spirituality, but how do you... Oh, okay, what I've noticed about you is that you have like a clear vision in your mind. So how do you find that clarity?
The clear vision. I think exercising helps a lot. I think what you consume as well, eating, your habits, like your daily habits, at what time you wake up, at what time you go to bed, all of that makes your mind clear. So I think that just surrounding yourself with a healthy environment and with the people you love as well, that really helps you find your vision and your purpose in life. And I think my purpose is just, spending time with my family, being happy. I find happiness in that, working out, my business. So I think that really helps me find a clear vision, not just in a business context, but in everything in life. Yeah, in a wholesome context, exactly.
Okay. What would be your last advice for anyone watching or listening to this podcast?
Right. So I would say, if you do want to start your own thing, just a lot of people I've spoken to are always scared of starting out their own thing. So just manifest it, like you said, and go for it and do it, and never be afraid of failure. I think just going for it is always the right thing. So you have no regrets in the future. And even if it doesn't go the way you thought it would, you learn a lot from the process. So good luck.
Okay, I love that advice. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Of course, thank you so much for having me. Muchas gracias. Merci beaucoup.